All right, so today we're diving into 19th century Japan with Heart of a Samurai. And even though we're only looking at chapter one today with this study guide you provided, there's already a lot to unpack, it seems like.
Yeah.
There's adventure and cultural clashes and nature at its most intense.
Well, and you're right to say adventure because just from the very first line, the author sets this kind of tone of foreboding.
Hmm.
You know, it's subtle, but you get this sense of venturing into the unknown, which, as we know, is exactly what happens to our main character.
Exactly. We start in January 1841 on this fishing boat off the coast of Shikoku, Japan, with our protagonist, the young Manjiro, surrounded by this seasoned crew. But even their experience can't prepare them for what's coming. And you immediately get this contrast between Manjiro's like youthful curiosity
Yeah.
and the older fisherman's more like grounded, almost superstitious view of the world.
Right, and that difference in outlook, I think, becomes even more interesting when you consider what Manjiro wants to be when he grows up, which is a samurai.
Which gets him laughed at, pretty much.
It does. And you might think, oh, typical adults dismissing a kid's dream. But this seemingly, childish ambition actually speaks volumes about Japanese society at the time.
Mm-hmm.
This rigid class system meant that for someone like Manjiro, a simple fisherman's son, even dreaming of becoming a samurai was practically unthinkable,
Yeah.
you know?
So right from the beginning, we see Manjiro like chafing against the limitations of his world.
Precisely. It's this yearning for something more, this refusal to be defined by the expectations of his society.
And this desire to prove himself is especially poignant because he's already carrying the weight of a past mistake, that incident with the rice husking.
Oh, right.
You can tell that he's desperate to redeem himself and to make his family proud.
Absolutely. This desire for redemption is a powerful motivator for Manjiro. It adds another layer to his character and makes his journey even more compelling.
And then, just as his questions about the world beyond their fishing grounds are met with warnings of barbarians and demons, the author throws another curveball, this massive storm.
And this isn't just any storm. The author uses this incredibly vivid language to almost make the storm a character itself, this relentless force of nature that tests the limits of human endurance.
The way you describe it, it's like the storm represents the immense challenges Manjiro will face throughout the story.
Exactly. The storm serves as this early test of resilience, a taste of the obstacles that stand between Manjiro and his dreams, whatever those dreams may ultimately become.
So we've got this young boy full of questions and this like burning desire to prove himself caught in the middle of a raging storm. What could possibly happen next?
Well, that's where things get really interesting. Because even as the storm rages around him, Manjiro doesn't stop seeking answers.
It's like he's trying to find a reason for the chaos, some way to make sense of this terrifying situation.
Yeah.
Like trying to find reason in all the chaos, right? It's like a classic trope.
Absolutely. And the author does such a masterful job of highlighting that contrast, too.
Hmm.
While the other fishermen are focused solely on survival, Manjiro wants to understand, the why of it all. Yeah. He's still asking questions, even with the boat practically breaking apart around him. It really speaks to his character, this thirst for knowledge that even fear can't extinguish.
This brings us back to Manjiro's dream of becoming a samurai.
Yeah.
As you pointed out, it's more than just some kind of childhood fantasy.
Right.
It reflects his desire to break free from the constraints of his social standing.
Exactly. This dream, which again seems impossible given the rigid class structure of 19th century Japan, speaks volumes about his character. He dares to envision this different future for himself, one full of, honor and possibility.
But right now, his present reality is anything but honorable. I mean, he messed up with the rice husking.
Yeah,
And you can tell he carries the weight of that mistake with him.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's another aspect that makes Manjiro so relatable, this yearning for redemption, for a chance to make things right. It's something I think we can all connect with on some level.
It makes you wonder, if he hadn't made that mistake with the rice husking, would he still cling so tightly to this dream of being a samurai? Or would the storm be enough to, break his spirit entirely?
That's a fascinating question. It makes you think about the complex interplay of circumstances and this kind of inner drive that shapes a person's path.
And speaking of paths, just when it seems like all hope is lost, and the fishermen are, resigning themselves to their fate,
Yeah,
Manjiro spots something in the distance.
the seabird. This seemingly insignificant detail is actually a brilliant stroke by the author.
Because it offers a glimmer of hope, right?
Exactly. But it's more than just that. Remember what we talked about earlier, how authors use symbolism to add these layers of depth to their stories.
Right. So the seabird isn't just a random bird. It represents something more profound.
Precisely. In literature, birds often symbolize things like hope and freedom and the unknown. And in this case, the seabird represents a potential escape from their dire circumstances, this beacon of possibility in this vast, unforgiving sea.
And then out of the mist, an island emerges. But it's not exactly the tropical paradise one might hope for.
No, it's shrouded in this, like, mystery, almost ominous in his appearance. The author describes it as having this strange shifting appearance,
Right.
which creates this unsettling feeling of uncertainty.
It's like the island itself is playing tricks on them. At first, it seems to be moving, which really threw me for a loop when I first read it.
And that detail, that initial illusion of movement, is a clever way that the author plays with our perception.
Uh-huh.
It turns out that the island is actually covered in birds, which, when you think about it, adds another layer of meaning to that whole seabird symbolism we were talking about.
Oh, I see what you mean. So at first, the lone seabird represents hope, but now this island teeming with birds takes on this whole other meaning.
Exactly. It's as if the author is saying that hope like those birds can be fleeting and deceptive.
Like it's not always what it seems, especially when you're lost and desperate at sea. But even with that, with the island's appearance, you can feel the fishermen's hope fading as they get closer and the sun begins to set, revealing this harsh, rocky landscape.
And that's where the author leaves us hanging on a cliffhanger, wondering if this island will be their salvation or just another challenge in this already impossible situation.
It makes you appreciate how much tension and intrigue an author can pack into a single chapter.
Yeah, it makes you
Yeah.
wonder, like, what's going to happen to these guys. But even with all that, like, unresolved tension, it doesn't feel incomplete.
You're right, and that's a testament to the author's skill, I think.
Mm.
This first chapter, even without showing us what happens next, offers this powerful blend of adventure and cultural insight and human resilience in the face of these overwhelming odds.
And that's where this study guide comes in. I have to admit, I sometimes skip these things, but this one is full of these, like, thought-provoking questions that make you want to go back and, like, look for clues. Absolutely. For example, there's a question here that asks about the significance of the recurring references to the sea. What do you make of that?
Well, on one level, the sea represents the familiar, right? It's Manjiro's world, it's his livelihood. But it also represents the unpredictable, this vast unknown that both terrifies and calls to him.
Exactly. The sea is this source of both comfort and danger, reflecting, I think, the duality of Manjiro's situation.
Yeah.
He finds himself adrift, literally and figuratively, caught between the like he knows and the uncertain future that lies ahead.
Right. And that kind of ties into another question the study guide asks. How does this chapter foreshadow the challenges and opportunities that Manjiro will face throughout his journey? Like, what do you think? Will he become a samurai?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And while we can't predict the future of the story, this chapter definitely sets the stage for this journey of transformation. I think Manjiro's experience as both the storm and this glimpse of the mysterious island suggests that he'll face trials that will test his strength and his resilience.
And potentially push him beyond the confines of his social class.
Precisely. Remember, his desire to be a samurai isn't just about the status. It represents this longing for something more, this desire to break free from the limitations that have been imposed on him.
So, as we leave Manjiro and the fishermen adrift, facing an uncertain fate on that mysterious island, we're left with this sense of anticipation for the journey ahead, and I think a deeper understanding of the themes that will likely unfold.
Exactly. And it makes you think, what would it take for someone like you or me to break free from the expectations of our own lives and venture into the unknown? What internal storms would we have to weather, and what opportunities might await us on the other side?
That's something to ponder. All right, so as we wrap up our deep dive into Heart of a Samurai, let's remember that sometimes the most profound journeys begin with a single step into the unknown.